Every generation thinks they figured out money better than the last one, and every single generation is wrong. Not because they're dumb, not because they're reckless, but because the trap doesn't look like a trap. It looks like common sense. It looks like progress. And by the time you realize what happened, you've already spent 15 or 20 years feeding it. I'm Dre, and I've been obsessed with one question lately. If every generation can see the financial mistakes of the generation before them so clearly, why do they keep making the exact same mistake in a different outfit? That's what we're breaking down today. Here's the core of it. Every generation inherits a definition of what it means to be doing well financially. Nobody hands you a written list. Nobody sits you down and explains it. You just absorb it. You pick it up from the people around you, from the culture, from what gets admired and celebrated and rewarded with social approval. And then you spend your working life trying to hit that definition. The problem is that the definition was never designed to make you wealthy. It was designed to make you look wealthy. And those are two completely different things. The gap between looking like you've arrived and actually arriving is where every generation loses money. The shape of that gap just changes depending on the decade you grew up in. Let's start with the generation that came of age in the 1960s and 70s. If you grew up in the post-war era, the financial script handed to you was brutally simple. Buy a house. A big one, if you can swing it. Home ownership wasn't just a financial decision back then. It was an identity. It meant you'd made something of yourself. Your parents probably rented their whole lives, and the idea that you could own property, real property, with a deed and a yard, felt like proof that the world was getting better and you were part of that progress. So when the bank approved you for the largest mortgage you could qualify for, you signed without a second thought. And honestly, for a long time, it worked. Property values climbed. Inflation was high, but so was appreciation. That house genuinely became worth 3, 4, even 5 times what you paid for it over the decades. On paper, you looked like a genius. But here's the part nobody talks about. If you're sitting in that house today in your late 60s or 70s, and the majority of your net worth is locked inside those 4 walls, you've got a problem. Because a house you live in isn't a liquid asset. It doesn't pay your grocery bills. It doesn't cover your prescriptions. It doesn't fund 25 years of retirement. And if your company restructured your pension in the 90s, which happened to millions of people, you might be sitting on a house worth $500,000 with a savings account that wouldn't last 5 years. The home was never the mistake. Treating the home as the entire financial plan was the mistake. You spent decades maintaining the signal of wealth, the extensions, the landscaping, the upgrades, while quietly underfunding everything that actually needed to compound over time. Retirement accounts, diversified investments, cash reserves. The belief that property alone would carry you through is the version of the trap that caught an entire generation. And most of them still don't see it because the house is right there, gleaming, looking exactly like success is supposed to look. Now, if you came up in the 1980s and 90s, your generation watched all of that and thought you'd do it smarter. You saw your parents pour everything into one asset and decided you'd earn more, diversify more, live bigger, but better. And to your credit, you did earn more. Dual income households became the norm. Career trajectories were steeper. The money was real. But something else happened that nobody warned you about. Every time your income went up, your lifestyle went up right alongside it. You got promoted at 32. You upgraded the car. You crossed 6 figures at 38. You moved to a bigger house in a better zip code. The kids started private activities. The annual holiday became international. The weekday dinners got a little more expensive. Each individual decision was completely reasonable. You could afford it. You'd earned it. Nobody would look at any single purchase and call it irresponsible. But the cumulative effect was devastating. Your expenses grew at exactly the same rate as your income. So despite earning more than your parents ever dreamed of, your actual savings rate barely moved. The gap between what came in and what went out stayed stubbornly thin, just at a higher number. This is what financial planners call lifestyle creep, and it is the silent killer of high earners. You can earn $200,000 a year and still be 15 years from retirement with not nearly enough saved because every raise got absorbed into a slightly more expensive version of the same life. The arrival signal for your generation was lifestyle, nice things, curated experiences, a visible quality of life that communicated success. And you delivered that signal every month, automatically, on direct debit. If you're a millennial, I want to say something before we go further. The system moved against your generation in ways that were genuinely unfair. The 2008 financial crisis landed right when you were supposed to be building your foundation. Entry-level jobs evaporated. Student loan balances ballooned. Housing prices in major cities became a cruel joke. That context matters, and it's real. But here's where it gets complicated. When the traditional markers of financial arrival became unreachable, your generation didn't stop spending. You redirected. Instead of houses and pensions and equity, you spent on the things that were accessible: travel, restaurants, concerts, subscriptions, convenience. Experiences became the currency of arrival, and the culture didn't just permit this, it actively celebrated it. Every lifestyle brand, every viral caption, every think piece told you the same story. Spend on experiences, not things. Collect memories, not possessions. The older generations had it wrong. This was the enlightened path. It sounded like wisdom. It felt like wisdom. But here's what it actually was. It was a different costume on the same trap. Because experiences, as beautiful as they are, don't compound. A $2,000 trip to Portugal is a memory, and memories matter. But it's also $2,000 that didn't go into an index fund that would have been worth $8,000 or $9,000 by the time you're 60. If you're in your mid to late 30s right now with a full passport and very little invested, you already know this feeling. It's that low-grade anxiety about the future that you manage by booking the next trip. The arrival signal for your generation was the lived life, the story, the richness of experience. And it was marketed to you so effectively that questioning it felt almost ungrateful. And then there's the youngest generation in the workforce right now. And this is where the trap gets genuinely fascinating, because this generation is the most financially literate in history. They know what an index fund is by 19. They talk about compound interest like it's weather. They consume finance content for entertainment. So you'd think the trap wouldn't work on them. But it does. It just wears different clothes. For the youngest earners right now, the arrival signal isn't a house or a lifestyle or a passport. It's an aesthetic. It's the curated apartment, the tech setup, the wardrobe that communicates taste and status to an audience of thousands. It's not about having money. It's about looking like you have money and doing it in a way that's visually optimized for a screen. And here's the cruel twist. This generation is doing this while simultaneously investing. They might put $50 or $60 a month into a stocks and shares account, and they're genuinely proud of that, and they should be. But they're also spending 3 or 4 times that amount on things whose primary function is appearance. The trap here isn't ignorance, it's performance. Knowing the right vocabulary, posting about financial freedom, talking about building wealth, while the actual numbers tell a quieter, less impressive story. The performance of wealth is outpacing the construction of it. So 4 generations, 4 decades, 4 completely different cultures, and the same trap every single time. The signal of arrival matters more than the substance of arrival. Looking wealthy beats being wealthy because looking wealthy gets you social validation right now. And being wealthy is invisible and slow and boring and takes years to pay off. The people who escape it, and every generation has some who do, all figured out the same thing. They separated the signal from the substance. They made a conscious decision to look less wealthy than they actually were so that their real wealth could grow faster. They drove the older car. They stayed in the smaller place. They skipped a few trips. They resisted the aesthetic upgrade. And they took the difference and put it somewhere that compounded quietly in the background. For the older generation, that would have meant keeping the house, but also aggressively funding retirement accounts instead of going all in on one asset. For the high earners, it would have meant choosing one lifestyle upgrade per raise and banking the rest, letting income growth outpace lifestyle growth. For millennials, one major trip a year instead of 4, with the difference going into an index fund on autopilot. For the youngest workers, making the actual investment number the thing worth showing off, not the apartment or the setup.
The rule, if you want one, is simple.
Assets first, lifestyle second. Not forever, just until your assets are generating enough on their own that the lifestyle is genuinely funded by returns, not by your next paycheck. That's the move every generation that built real wealth eventually figured out. And the ones who didn't figure it out kept spending decades performing a version of success that was always one crisis away from collapsing. So here's what I want you to sit with. Which version of the trap are you living in right now? Is it the house that holds all your net worth? Is it the lifestyle that expanded with every raise? Is it the experiences that felt like living but quietly replaced building? Or is it the aesthetic that performs wealth better than it creates it? You don't have to answer that publicly, but answer it honestly, to yourself. Because the first step out of any trap is being able to name it. And once you name it, the exit becomes obvious. It was always obvious. It just wasn't comfortable. If this one made you think, do me a favor and subscribe. I make videos like this every week, breaking down the money patterns nobody else wants to talk about. I'll see you in the next one.